Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Arvan tells a story. Now I will tell about Malaysia. Malaysia is a country in Southeast Asia. The federal constitutional monarchy consists of 13 states and 3 federal territories, separated by the South China Sea into 2 regions, Peninsular Malaysia and Borneo's East Malaysia. Peninsular Malaysia shares a land and maritime border with Thailand and maritime border with Singapore, Vietnam and Indonesia. East Malaysia shares land and maritime border with Brunei and Indonesia, and the maritime border with the Philippines and Vietnam. Kuala Lumpur, guys, is the national capital, largest city and the seat of the legislative branch of the federal government. The nearby plains capital of Putrajaya is the administrative capital, which represents the seat of both the executive branch. This is cabinet, federal ministers and agencies, and the judicial branch of the federal government. With a population of over 32 million, Malaysia is the world's 40th most populous country. The southernmost point of continental Eurasia is in Tanjung Piai in the tropics. Malaysia is one of 17 megadiverse countries, home to numerous endemic species. Malaysia has its origins in the Malay kingdoms, which from the 18th century became subject to the British Empire, along with the British Straits Settlements Protectorate. Peninsular Malaysia was unified as the Malayan Union in 1946. Malaya was restructured as the Federation of Malaya in 1948 and achieved independence on 31 August 1957. The independent Malaya united with the 10 British Crown colonies of the North Borneo, Sarawak, and Singapore on 16 September 1963 to become Malaysia. In August 1965, Singapore was expelled from the Federation and became a separate independent country. The country is multi-ethnic and multicultural, which has a significant effect on its politics. About half the population is ethnically Malay, with minorities of Chinese, Indians, and indigenous peoples. The country's official language is Malaysian, a standard form of the Malay language. English remains an active second language, while recognizing Islam as the country's established religion. The constitution grants freedom of religion to non-Muslims. The government is modeled on the Westminster parliamentary system, and the legal system is based on common law. The head of state is an elected monarch, chosen from among the 9 state sultans every 5 years. The head of government is the prime minister. After independence, the Malaysian GDP grew at an average of 6.5% per annum for almost 50 years. The economy has traditionally been fueled by its natural resources, but is expanding in the sectors of science, tourism, commerce, and medical tourism. Malaysia has a newly industrialized market economy, ranks 3rd largest in Southeast Asia and 33rd largest in the world. It is a founding member of ASEAN, EAS, OIC, and a member of APEC, the Commonwealth, and the Non-Alignment Movement. History. Evidence of modern human habitation in Malaysia dates back 40,000 years. In the Malay Peninsula, the first inhabitants are thought to be Negritos. Traders and settlers from India and China arrived as early as the 1st century AD, establishing trading ports and coastal towns in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. Their presence resulted in strong Indian and Chinese influences on the local cultures, and the people of the Malay Peninsula adopted the religions of Hinduism and Buddhism. Sanskrit inscriptions appear as early as the 4th or 5th century. The kingdom of Lankasuka arose around the 2nd century in the northern area of the Malay Peninsula, lasting until about the 15th century. Between the 7th and 13th centuries, much of the southern Malay Peninsula was part of the maritime Srivijayan Empire. By the 13th and the 14th century, the Majapahit Empire had successfully wrested control over most of the peninsula and the Malay archipelago from Srivijaya. In the early 15th century, Parameswara, a runaway king of the former kingdom of Singapura, linked to the old Srivijayan courts, founded the Malacca Sultanate. The spread of Islam increased following Parameswara's conversion to that religion. Malacca was an important commercial center during this time, attracting trade from around the region. By 1826, the British directly controlled Penang, Malacca, Singapore, and island of Labuan, which they established as the crown colony of the Straits settlements. By the 20th century, the state of Pahang, Selangor, Perak, and Negeri Sembilan, known together as the Federate Malay States, had British residents appointed to advise the Malay rulers, to whom the rulers were bound to defer by treaty. The remaining 5 states in the peninsula, known as the Unfederated Malay States, were not directly under British rule, also accepted British advisors around the turn of the 20th century. Development on the peninsula and Borneo were generally superior until the 19th century. Under British rule, the immigration of Chinese and Indians to serve as laborers was encouraged. The area that is now Sabah came under British control as North Borneo when both the Sultan of Brunei and the Sultan of Sulu transferred their respective territorial right of ownership. Between 1877 and 1878, in 1842, Sarawak was ceded by the Sultan of Brunei to James Brooke, whose successors ruled as the White Raja over an independent kingdom until 1946, when it became a crown colony. In the Second World War, the Japanese army invaded and occupied Malaya, North Borneo, Sarawak, and Singapore for over 3 years. During this time, ethnic tensions were rising and nationalism grew. Popular support for independence increased. After Malaya was reconquered by Allied forces, and post-war British plans to unite the administration of Malaya under a single crown colony called the Malayan Union met with strong opposition from the Malays, who opposed the weakening of the Malay rulers and the granting of citizenships to the ethnic Chinese. To the ethnic Chinese. The Malayan Union, established in 1946 and consisting of all the British possessions in the Malay Peninsula with the exception of Singapore, was quickly dissolved and replaced on 1st of February 1984. 1st of February 1948 by the Federation of Malaya, which restores the autonomy of the rulers of the Malaya states under British protection. During this time, the most ethnically Chinese rebels under the leadership of the Malayan Communist Party launched guerrilla operation designed to force the British out of Malaya. The Malayan emergency in 1948 until 1960 involved a long anti-insurgency campaigns by Commonwealth troops in Malaya. On 31st of August 1957, Malaya became an independent member of the Commonwealth of Nations. After this, a plan was put in place to federate Malaya with the Crown Colonies of North Borneo, which joins as Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore. The date of federation was planned to be 31st of August 1963, so as to coincide with the anniversary of Malayan independence. However, guys, federation was delayed until 16 September of 1963 in order for a United Nations survey of support for federation in Sabah and Sarawak, called for by parties opposed to federation including Indonesia's Sukarno and the Sarawak United People's Party to be completed. Federation brought heightened tensions, including a conflict with Indonesia as well, continuous conflicts against the communists in Borneo and the Malayan Peninsula, which escalates to the Sarawak communist insurgency and second Malayan emergency together with several other issues, such as the cross-border attacks into North Borneo by Moro pirates from the southern islands of the Philippines. Singapore being expelled from the Federation in 1965 and Russia's strife. This trip culminated in the 13th of May riots in 1969. After the riots, the controversial new economic policy was launched by Prime Minister Tun Abdul Razak, trying to increase the share of the economy held by the Bumiputra. Under Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, there was a period of rapid economic growth and urbanization. Beginning in the 1980s, the economy shifted from being agriculturally based to one based on manufacturing and industry. Numerous mega projects were completed, such as the Petronas Towers, the North-South Expressway, the Multimedia Super Corridor, and the new federal administrative capital of Putrajaya. However, guys, in the late 1990s, the Asian financial crisis almost caused the collapse of the currency and the stock and property markets. Although they later recovered, the 1MDB scandal was a major global corruption scandal that implicated then Prime Minister Najib Razak in 2015. This scandal contributed to the first change in ruling political party since independence in the 2018 general election. In the 2020s, the country was gripped by political crisis that coincided with health and economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Economy. Malaysia is a relatively open state-oriented and newly industrialized market economy. It has the world's 34th largest economy, nominal GDP, and the 31st largest by PPP. In 2017, the largest service sector contributed to 53.6% of total GDP, the industrial sector 37.6%, and the smallest agriculture sector roughly 8.8%. Malaysia has a low official unemployment rate of 30.9%. Its foreign exchange reserve are the world's 24th largest. It has a labor force of about 50 million, which is the world's 34th largest. Malaysia's largest automotive industry ranks as the world's 22nd largest by production. Malaysia is the world's 23rd largest exporter and 25th largest importer. However, economic inequalities exist between different ethnic groups. The Chinese make up about 1/4 of the population, baht accounts for 70% of the country's market capitalization. Chinese businesses in Malaysia are part of the larger Bamboo network, a network of overseas Chinese businesses in the Southeast Asian market sharing common family and cultural ties. International trade, facilitated by the shipping route in adjacent Strait of Malacca, and manufacturing are the key sectors. Malaysia is an exporter of natural and agricultural resources, and petroleum is a major export. Malaysia has once been the largest producer of tin, rubber, and palm oil in the world. Manufacturing has a largest influence in the country's economy. Although Malaysia's economic structure has been moving away from it, Malaysia remains one of the world's largest producers of palm oil. In addition, tourism is the third largest contributor to Malaysia's GDP after the manufacturing and commodities sectors. In 2019, the sector contributed about 15.9% and to the global GDP, according to the World Tourism Organization. Malaysia was the 14th most visited country in the world and the fourth most visited country in Asia in 2019, with over 26.1 million visits. Malaysia was ranked 38 in the Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report 2019. Its international tourism received in 2019 amounted to $19.8 billion. The country has developed into a center of Islamic banking and has the highest numbers of female workers in that industry. Knowledge-based service area also expanding. In 2020, Malaysian exported high-technology products worth $92.1 billion, the second highest in the Asian after Singapore. Malaysia was ranked 36th in the Global Innovation Index in 2021 and 32nd in the Global Competitiveness Report in 2020. Culture. Malaysia has a multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multilingual society. The original culture of the area stems from indigenous tribes that inhabited it, along with the Malays who later moved there. Substantial influence exists from Chinese and Indian culture, dating back to when foreign trade began. Other cultural influences include the Persian, Arabic, and British cultures. Due to the structure of the government coupled with the social contract theory, there has been minimal cultural assimilation of ethnic minorities. Some cultural dispute exists between Malaysia and neighboring countries, notably Indonesia. In 1971, the government created a national cultural policy defining Malaysian culture. It stated that Malaysian culture must be based on the culture of the indigenous peoples of Malaysia, that it may incorporate suitable elements from other cultures, and that Islam must play a part in it. It also promoted the Malay language above others. This government intervention into culture has caused resentment among non-Malay who feel their cultural freedom was lessened. Both Chinese and Indian associations have submitted memorandums to the government accusing it of formulating an undemocratic culture policy. And we still continue of course, education. The education system of Malaysia features a non-compulsory kindergarten education followed by 6 years of compulsory primary education and 5 years of optional secondary education. Schools in the primary education system are divided into two categories: national primary schools, which stays in Malay, and vernacular schools, which stays in Chinese or Tamil. Secondary education is conducted for 5 years in the final year of secondary education. Students sit for the Malaysian Certificate of Education examination. Since the introduction of the matriculation programs in 1999, students who completed the 12-month programs in matriculation colleges can enroll in local universities. However, in the matriculation system, only 10% of places are open to non-Bumiputra students. Okay guys, thank you for watching. See you soon in another video. Bye.